like we are live. Welcome for those watching on either Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. I am Greg Ayotte, Director of Consumer Services with the Brain Injury Association of America. And today we are here with members of the Brain Injury Association Survivor Advisory Council. And we thought we would have a discussion about building a community after brain injury. This is a topic we get many questions about. So I felt it would be good to have that conversation about the opportunities and challenges of building a community after brain injury. So I'm just going to jump right in and start kind of asking some of the questions to the group. So feel free to answer as you see appropriate. So really the first question is, what does building a community after a brain injury mean to you, and why is it important? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
I'll jump in.
All right.
So, good morning or afternoon. I'm Kaz O'Shea Marie. And to me, building community can kind of look like a lot of different things. It could be in person, it could be, virtual. But to me, community really just means the ways that we come together as people. We may have things in common with certain aspects of your community, or you may not have that many things in common with certain aspects of your community. But really, it's just the ways that we come together as people. I think that's really important because I do really believe that no man is an island and we need each other for support, we need each other for encouragement and for fun. So, building community is a very important thing to do, especially after a brain injury, which can be a very isolating experience. So, building community is definitely very important.
And I think building on what Shay just said, as human beings, we need community. We need one another. And after brain injury, a lot of us lose our communities. We lose because we don't fit anymore. I mean, I was a teacher before my injury. I was a musician, and I couldn't do those things anymore. And I didn't quite fit in those communities anymore. And we have to build new ones. And I think it's really important that we title this Facebook, this live, Building Community, because it is something we build. And it is a community is a structure that supports us, that finding people who share our experience, it does support us, through that isolation. And they can support us, we support others, and it helps us to grow into this new role that we have as brain injury survivors.
And we obviously all need that during the good times and everything, but when you go through something traumatic, whether it's brain injury or any other event in life, I feel like we all tend to feel extremely isolated. And that's the time that we need community the most. Regardless of what we're going through, we need people to be there saying, I hear you, you're not alone. Even if it's just distracting, even if they don't have something similar going on in their lives, it's just so important because I feel just, sad situations, we're automatically feeling so much more isolated, let alone, like Carol said, when so many of these things were taken away from us, we might be housebound. There's just so many different social situations that we can no longer attend, and we need it so badly just to get through the day, really.
So for me, thank you for everyone that just commented. And by the way, congratulate yourself for getting to this webinar, this event.
This is building community.
Yeah,
it is. And for me, as a young survivor, I'm 17 years out. If I wanted to tell somebody where to be in their world on this, is to get extra time on your schedule. Yes, it takes 20 minutes to get to a hospital where the support group is, but to get into the support group takes another half an hour for a survivor, because we get lost and we run out of steam and then we need food. So gather up all that energy, the food, the water, the rest, the hour to get there, even though it might take 20 minutes. Release all that worry so that when you get to the support meeting, you're in the support meeting. And by the way, 80% of my survival rate, or whatever you want to call it, my recovery, I don't even like that word, but 80% of it was through sharing information in free areas like this. You're on a meeting right now. So take a little time and take your brain injury with you
Mhm.
and cater to what it needs. And it's most often it's time.
And I think what Paul as well as Shay were saying, that there are so many different ways that we can build a community. We are doing it right now within this live that the five of us who are here, all of you who are listening. This is a way to build community. We can do this virtually. We can do this in person. That it's about figuring out wherever we are in our brain injury journeys and what it is that we can do, kind of right now, because what might work for us early in our journey for community, that maybe we can only work on one-on-one or only the virtual stuff, but then gradually maybe we can work up to doing in-person things. And it's about, wherever we are now and what works right now.
Mhm.
That jumps right into the next question.
That's what I thought.
So, as a survivor, how have you built your community?
Well, I can start, since I did kind of start
You just
answering
did
that
tell you
question.
started answering that anyways.
Sure.
There you
Yes.
go.
And for me, it was a very step-by-step process. And it really started one-on-one for me, because groups, after my brain injury, it was just too much for me. Too many people, too many stories, too much emotion. I could barely handle my own brain injury. I couldn't handle much from anybody else. But I was going to brain injury rehab, and I met one other survivor, and her story was similar to my story. She had been a teacher too, and we started going to lunch together once a month, and that we shared our stories. And that helped me to feel not so alone. I think all of us talked about that not feeling alone. I think that's one of the biggest things about building community, is it helps us to feel not alone, and we so need that. And then the next step was eventually joining a support group. I tried one, did not work for me. I eventually tried a second one that was more people who had injuries that were similar to mine. I could see their stories in my stories. I actually now lead that support group. Then somebody in that support group, I don't know how she wanted to write. She knew that I liked to write. She said, "Carol, you want to form a writing group?" There were a couple other people that we wanted to write. She wrote a book. I wrote a book. That we created a community kind of writers from within that group. We created from that group. We created a community of others of us who wanted to do education. We did presentations together. I started going to Brain Injury Awareness Day. Met all of you, and joined this group. And my community grew from one to my local area to national, knowing survivors all across the country. And it is that one little bit at a time, and that by hearing each other's stories, you feel less alone, and that there can be a path out there for you.
For me, I actually did not have any energy to go out and find other brain injury survivors at the beginning. I could barely leave bed. I was feeling so horrible that I really didn't try and didn't have the energy to find support groups or anything like that. And so I tried to work really hard to keep the relationships in my life that I already previously had. And for me, and I think for almost, I'm not going to say every brain injury survivor, but for most of us, I feel like we've lost a lot of personal relationships over a brain injury, whether it's convenience, we're no longer going to work, we're no longer, able to do the same social activities, but it's very painful and it's extremely difficult to get through. So when I was building my community, I think something that was difficult for me that I didn't even realize at the time was that it was really hard for me to sort of keep reciprocal relationships. It was really hard to, make sure I was checking in and doing just as much friendship as they were doing to me. So they would ask, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, horrible," and it was difficult, like I was in university when it happened and I had to drop out, and hearing about like how stressful it was to have to be studying for an exam that day. And I would get jealous. And I know that's embarrassing to admit, but I would get so jealous. I was like, I would love to be studying for an exam, and I would love, like a lot of people lost their jobs and they would love to be complaining about a stressful day at work. But I think once I realized what I was doing, I think that helped a lot. And it also is hard on the opposite end. People don't want to complain. I feel like even now, I'm 11 years out. If someone complains that they have a headache, they get nervous and they're like, oh, you've had a debilitating headache for 11 years. I'm so sorry I'm bringing this up. And it can't be, like, I don't own headaches. I want to hear about your problems. I want to, be your friend and hold your hand through your tough times too. And that was definitely a struggle for me, working through and building the community of the community I already had.
Yeah,
I
for me,
personally could not stop going and finding other communities because I was alone. I was told I was alone. I was told that I was not going to get over this. And now I had a plate of bad news to deal with. So I had to get to institutions, organizations, universities. And I found over and over again, I kept saying, oh, is that so? Is that how that works? And it was lighting me up to realize, hey, swallowing is a thing after brain injury. I didn't know that. Migraines, that's a thing after brain injury. I didn't know that either. And quite honestly, I was in denial for at least 2 years just because I looked fine. I could get away with that. And boy, was I doing myself a disservice. But to show up and be around other people that get it is very rewarding. And I speak from personal experience.
Mhm.
It's interesting that each of you had a different route on how you connected.
Every
and I
brain's
had
different.
Mhm.
Yes, I also had kind of a different experience as well in building community after sustaining a brain injury. And it was interesting because even though I consider myself to be more of an introvert, I really prefer in-person kind of interactions. But through the course of my brain injury recovery, even now 7 years out, I find that kind of what was previously mentioned by the rest of the team, that sometimes, after I do the things that I have to do, I don't have any capacity to do the things that I want to do,
Mm.
which includes spending time with my friends and things like that. And so a lot of the ways that I've been able to build community was actually online through virtual interactions, because I share a lot of my journey through content, through social media, just being able to find other survivors and share ideas. I interact with brain injury survivors on a daily basis. And so that's been really great for me to learn, to interact, to encourage each other. And so, again, building community doesn't have to be something that's overly complicated. Figuring out in what ways it's going to work for you. And for me, especially in this time, doing it virtually has been really a game changer.
Indeed.
I think that's really important to realize that there's no one way to build that community, that you
Mhm.
have to figure out what works for you, what is available, and what you're able to do at that time. And it changes over time, right? So your
Yes.
capacity, your interests, change.
Yeah. And if something doesn't work the first time, it's okay to try something different. Just because something doesn't work doesn't mean nothing is going to work. It means, well, I think there are always ways for us to build community. In whatever small ways we can do. It's all about focusing on what we can do and figuring
Yes,
out whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, I think it's really important also to not kind of beat yourself up over it, because at times I have done that. Like, oh, I should be calling my friends. I should be doing more to put myself out there. And so
Mhm.
it's important during your journey, do what you can. It's
Yes.
whatever you have the capacity to do. And I love that saying. It's something like, do what you can during the day and then be done with it. So
Mhm.
don't carry that with you. Just whatever you're able to do, that's perfect. And you're doing a great job. So don't beat yourself over what you feel that you're not able to do.
Right. Because some days what we can do is spend time on the couch.
Which also brings up the point of the folks that are around me don't see it. And that can allow me the opportunity to just let it go. And I just want to reiterate, own your brain injury. Bring that awareness with you. Give yourself extra time. Give yourself grace for the fact that you had an event that changed the way your brain works. So give that extra time. Give that grace. We're all here to support you.
That kind of ties into the next question.
I didn't do that on purpose.
Well, how has having a community benefited you or affected you?
Well, I'll go first.
Jump in.
We here in South Louisiana, where I live, Cajun country, the heart of Cajun country, we didn't have a support group. And what we ended up doing is having a support group where everyone else out of the medical community came and talked to us about swallowing, about sleep, about everything that we could ever imagine that helps this. And it turned out to last over 13 years. And it's just a conversation. It's a room where conversation exists, just like this one. And we talk about how to deal with our stuff, not sit with our stuff. We've talked about mental illness for the longest time. This is different, in my opinion, because we've actually snapped things. We've moved things around. So let's figure out how we can support that in a healthy way and maybe get a better life. Let's try it that way. So there's an idea for you. Did it for 13 and a half years. And now we're moving on to online, like you just mentioned, because we're still in need of help as a community. So yes. Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah, like I was talking about earlier about losing people in my life, it was really difficult. And, as Paul said, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience here understand, when you look fine, and a lot of people don't know that much about brain injury, they don't know that much about like what is going on. And there's a lot of comments saying, is it really that bad? And then you start to internalize it, and it feels absolutely horrible because you need that support. You need people saying, I believe you, I see you, I want to spend time with you, even if it is, just staying on the couch all day. Like, I want to be there for you. But I feel like a lot of us don't necessarily always have that. And the loneliness and the losing people is so extremely difficult on top of already, going through what we're going through with our physical and emotional symptoms. It feels unbearable at sometimes, and it's just so extremely difficult. And I would say that having community, once, the first few years where you really do lose, I mean, for me at least, I lost a lot of people in my life. Once I had those people who have shown me that they will stand by me, it strengthened my relationships with them so much. And, just being able to hear them say, I believe you, I'm here for you, it made me say like, oh, yeah, this is bad. Like, what I'm going through is horrible. I do deserve that support. I do deserve, that affirmation that what I'm doing is pretty great. Like, even when I feel at my lowest, it can be really hard to congratulate yourself and be like, I woke up today. Like, I did this today. The teeniest celebrations, it's really nice to have people remind you of that was a victory, even if it felt like nothing.
Yeah, having people who get that on those bad brain days, that when it's like, putting my socks on today was a really big accomplishment, or figuring out, how do I make breakfast? Or somebody to text and say, I am having a bad brain day. And somebody who gets that, who can say, I hear you, just, do your time on the couch. It's okay. Tomorrow will be a better day. And having those folks who get that, who don't judge it, who aren't going to say, well, just try harder. You're fine. Just keep going. Just push through it. As we all know, those bad brain days come. We have to take care of ourselves. We need to do what our brains need. And having community can make those we can't stop the bad brain days, but they can make them more bearable. And then, for me, having a community of survivors that I do things with, whether that's education activities or writing, then I feel like I lost my career, young in my 30s. So I feel like I have, I can make a difference, like with other brain injury survivors. And that means a great deal to me, that, working together that we are able, and at our own pace, a survivor pace, that we accomplish something. And that means a lot to me, that we support one another, as we do that, in our own way, in our own pace. That
Just
means
to
a
jump-
lot as well.
Just to jump in, is in a lot of these cases, like I said, we ran a support group for a very long time, but in that process, I found folks meeting each other as family.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't family, but now they are, because now we share that common bond of, we've been there, we've done that. Now what do? We can help the next person out. Let's do that.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I've benefited greatly from building community as a brain injury survivor, especially I'm someone I would describe, I tend to not really share my feelings even before the brain injury. It just wasn't something that was a part of my personality. And so that kind of continued after the brain injury as well. And as well as it was really difficult for me to learn how to, I guess, depend on other people for help and things like that. But
Yes.
going through having a brain, I mean, going through life in general, you have to be able to do those things. You'll be much better off if you learn to do that, but especially after such a traumatic and life altering experience as acquiring a brain injury, you need to have people there to support you emotionally. You need to have people there to bounce ideas off of. And I would say probably most of what I really learned about brain injury, as was previously mentioned, was from interacting with other survivors. And so had I not taken those opportunities to go to the events, my local association holds different social events. We just had one last week. It was really fun. We got to make our own lipsticks at Lip Lab. But, just getting to talk about symptoms and things to go like, oh, okay, so this is actually related to my brain injury. I had no idea, and things to look out for. And so just as previously mentioned, being able to talk to people who understand and who validate you, who you can just go to and say, today has been a really rough day, and it's been a lot of really rough days, and they understand and are not going to give you those negative comments or say, oh, but you look fine. It's like, well, I appreciate that. I try to look fine, but I don't feel fine. So having that community, just those interactions has benefited me greatly, from the support, both emotionally and then just the knowledge as well.
Excellent. So on the flip side, what have been some of the challenges in building your community? What are some things you've come across you didn't anticipate?
I think it's a risk to put yourself out there, because building community, it does require that we put ourselves out there. We put our stories out there, and you never know how is somebody going to react. What are they going to say? Are these my people, or are these not my people? The very first support group that I went to, this was not my group. It was a room full of people crying, and I'm like, okay, nope. And it was like, I can barely handle my own emotions at this point. I cannot handle this. Is not quite right. That that was a risk. And I didn't go to another support group for quite a couple of years, because it was like, I don't know if I can handle this. And just the symptoms of brain injury. I think Kelly mentioned that reciprocal thing, that like, I want to be able to be there for other people, but sometimes brain injury means I'm on the couch, means I can't always do what I want to be able to do, to call another person, to make the plans, to show up for the plans, and brain injury gets in the way of things, and we need people to understand that flexibility. Those are some risks.
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
going to a couple of meetings here in Louisiana, and the first two meetings, the person who was managing the meeting walked up to me and said, "Now, are you a survivor?" I said, "Yeah, that's why I'm here." "Yeah, I would have never known." "Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the next one now, because you can't see me." It's not anybody's fault. It's the way this stone's been rolling for the last several decades. Try not to be offended, they're not on the same page, go to the next one or start your own like we did.
Yeah, and as Carol mentioned, I really think one of the biggest challenges is that level of vulnerability that it takes to build community. And when you have a brain injury, you're already feeling vulnerable in so many different ways. And so to add something else, to have to put yourself out there and to be transparent and to show up as your authentic self rather than trying to be who you were or not to show your symptoms or how you're feeling, it does take a level of vulnerability and bravery, to be perfectly honest. And so that can be a big challenge. And then also, again, just that physical capacity. Many times I've made plans and then the day of had to cancel, and that doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great for me, and I'm sure it didn't feel great for my friends either. But that's the reality of living with a brain injury, that you may start the day a certain way, but as the day progresses, those symptoms are just going to continue to worsen and flare up to the point that you're not able to do those things that you'd like to do. So it's definitely a combination of that vulnerability and then also the physical capacity can be challenges.
Yeah, and for me, I know Kaz O'Shea talked a lot how embarrassing and vulnerable it is to ask for help. That was very difficult. I also felt that, just as humans, it's a lot easier to remember the one negative comment versus, the 10 or 20 positive comments. And, you can really dwell on that and it can really take a toll on you. So that was difficult. I also felt that I had some difficulties with online support groups, because everyone is definitely trying to help each other. And if a medicine or a treatment worked really well for them or was really terrible to them, they want to protect others. And they say, you have to do this, or don't ever try that method. It's horrible. It'll ruin your life. And they really are being protective, but it's very overwhelming because what works for all of us is going to be very different than what works for other people. And just being able to, go through those comments and ask for advice, did this work for anyone? But also being able to filter out that, the people commenting are most likely having either extremely positive or extremely negative results with that treatment, because we want to protect others and we want them to get better. So that was something that took me a little bit to learn, just to have that in mind.
One thing to add to that, good point, Kelly. And one thing to add to that is if you can find 3 people that are saying the same thing about what your issue is, it might be closer to being true than not. In other words, I'm not going to take one person's answer. I'm going to take several people's responses to my question and sort that out as, now what part of that applies to me? Mm-hmm. And that's what I wasn't taught in the rehabilitation part of my journey, because that wasn't something on the list. Now it is. Discern which one is going to work better for you. If you're diabetic, probably the product that has sugar all over it's not going to work for you. It's almost that simple. But patience and persistence.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of, in the calls that we get from folks, there's definitely a lot of trial and error, right? Trying to find something you think you're positive it's going to work. And it just does not, for whatever reason. So it's the idea of giving yourself the grace and the space to say, that didn't work for me, so I'm going to go try to find something else. And as Kelly said too, it's important to hear other people's experiences, but not take them as gospel, as that's all right. Well, that's one person's, that's helpful. It's helpful to know, but it doesn't necessarily decide for me kind of what the next step might be. Mm-hmm. So last question, probably one of the more important questions. So, what can survivors do to start to build their own community? What are some things that folks can do?
I'll go first. We can throw a party. We can have a barbecue cook-off that invites folks from the TV show about barbecuing, and we grew it from 6 teams to 28 teams. And the heads were reeling all day. We did this 4 years in a row, and they didn't know what brain injury was. None of them did. So I just kept repeating my story. I think it was probably 10 times that day. But folks walked away with the understanding that, hey, concussions count. That's great. We did our job. Another thing that we did was our meeting. Another thing that we did was a Better Brain Expo. And we brought everybody in from all around the medical community, except for those that work in the hospital per se. The speech therapists, all the therapists, all the different modalities came. And I'll never forget it. A mom backed up against the door and said, "Who are all these people?" I said, "These are the people that help folks that have brain injury." Well, it didn't tell me about this and where I was. Like, he got it now. And it was very popular. You may call it wellness, but we called it Better Brain Expo, calling it out for what it is. Just a couple examples. Thank you.
And I think some of what Paul is getting at is like focusing on what it is that we can do. Like I know somebody in one of the groups that I lead that she couldn't drive very far, but she wanted to do art, and she had met some other artists. So but she couldn't get to them, she invited them to her house. So it's kind of like making do with what we have, figuring out, well, what are my interests? What would I like to do? And that we've been talking about that. What can I do? That we take things one small step at a time. That, the idea of building community, it can seem like this ginormous thing, but like that expression, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. that you identify one small step. And one small step at a time, and things build. Community can build. So it's like, you know what? I'd like to join a support group. I don't know about support groups. All right, I'm going to call the Brain Injury Association. I'm going to find out where support groups are in my area. There's one small thing. And I mean, everything in my life as a brain injury survivor has grown from one small thing at a time. And just that little bit at a time, that whenever I would look at the big picture of something, overwhelm. And then I freeze because I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But if I just take it, all right, I'm going to do this what can I do? One small thing. Then it's what next thing can I do? One small thing, and then it grows. And I think that's how we find our power as survivors.
Indeed. And cherish those tiny little increments. Cherish each and every one of them. Each and every one of them. That brain will respond because you're putting positive into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think basically you guys said it so well, but again, just going back to in a nutshell, that it's finding out what works for you. It can look like a lot of different things. For me, some days community is just my family, my mom, my dad, my son, and my brother, and that's all that I can take, and that's all that I can do, and that's what it is, and it's perfect, and it's supportive, and it's beautiful, and that's what works. I know sometimes it can be really difficult to be a brain injury survivor in a not brain injury survivor world. It could be very exhausting to be in those spaces that are not specifically for us. But at the same time, if there are certain things that you are interested in, it's okay to join those groups, those art groups, or those, whatever your capacity can take, join those groups that are not specifically for brain injury survivors, but to go in and say, hey, I am a brain injury survivor. I can participate in this way. I may not be able to do everything, but if you want to go to yoga classes, you can tell them, this is my situation. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And it's okay, again, to give yourself grace and to have that vulnerability and bravery to say, this is where I'm at, and this is as much as I can do, and this is what's going to work for me in terms of building community. And then again, I always preach the virtual aspect, because a lot of us are housebound much of the time, and so that's really going to be the only way that we can get those interactions is online, and that's okay. Again, whatever is going to work best for you, there are practical ways to be able to attain those interactions and building that community.
I would also say that with things online or even in person, don't be intimidated by others. I remember I was looking at different, brain injury resources, and I would keep seeing the same names, and I was like, oh, I can't reach out to them because they're probably so busy and they're so successful at this or anything. There is no difference between us on this call and you. We all want to support each other. And if you reach out to an organization to either volunteer or, get to know people and they don't respond, don't take it to mean it's about you. It's because, we're all working on very limited capacity. It's not about you. Everyone would love to have you, and everyone's arms are open wide. But some of us, we can't respond to everything solely because we also have our limits, but it's not because you were rejected. So don't live in that rejection. Just reach out to someone else, reach out to a different organization or a different community. Like Carol, she tried out different support groups, and just because one didn't work doesn't mean that the other ones won't. Yeah, and also with trying different activities that I would have normally never done, I think that helped me a lot. I am horrible at art, but then I wanted to go out and do classes and so I would set different protections. So instead of being stressed out, like I went to a pottery class, I was like, oh, I will be so stressed that it's going to look ugly. So I was just like, whatever I make, I'm going to throw against a wall. Like after this, I'm going to shout. And then I can just have fun. This ugly piece would not stay in my my room. I could meet people. So yeah, just allow yourself, grace to try new things. Don't expect perfection. Allow yourself to be bad at things, but put yourself out there, and then it really pays off.
The only thing I would add to that, I'm sorry, interrupting again, but only thing I would add besides grace is maybe have a snack beforehand, maybe take a nap beforehand. We laugh only because it's true. We all do it, but we need to remember to get your protein up, get maybe a piece of chicken, maybe take a little nap, definitely have some water. And I would have to do this before every meeting because here I am running it and I'm a survivor. So prop up.
I had a nap and a snack before this live.
Yeah. I had eggs. That's just how it works.
I think that's a good point about the idea of being mindful of how much energy and attention it'll take to do something, like preparing for it, like recognizing, okay, this is going to take a little bit, and I know I'm not doing much the rest of the day. So it's the idea of kind of being mindful of what you're going to try and attempt, and trying to prepare as best you can for it. Increases the chances of success, right? So, but like I said, as you have all said, I think it's important for folks to hear this, is that you're going to try things that will not work. You're going to find yourself in situations like, this is not the place for me. And so listen to that little voice in your head, right? Listen to your gut saying, something's not right. And so you can regroup, trust the process, right? Trust that process of trying to figure out what's the next place to go, what's the next thing to try. Rely on others, listen to what people say, decide for yourself, try something, and start to slowly kind of build that community, right? Try to find things that are going to work for you. And I think, as each of you have kind of alluded to, as you're able to kind of find things that work for you, you find you're having more energy to give to others, right? To pay it forward, to pass it on, to get others involved in it. So that's kind of what the process looks like. So be mindful of that and aware of that. I thank each and every one of you for coming and sharing a little bit of your story. We hope this is helpful information for the folks that are watching now or may watch unrecorded. Again, folks are always welcome to contact us at the Brain Injury Association of America. Certainly feel free to reach out. We're always happy to try to give ideas or suggestions to folks for support groups or the resources in their area. So thanks everybody for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.